My name is Jeremy Walton, and this is the Cinematography of the Killer. Let's go! It took a lot to put all this together into one video. I really had to dig to find some good info. I wish I had more behind the scenes footage for you. If something comes out after I upload this, I'll link it below. We're gonna get into camera, lenses, the look, and the fight scene. We're talking about the 2023 film The Killer, directed by David Fincher and cinematography by Erik Messerschmidt. We're gonna start with the camera. You may already know they used the V-Raptor Stormtrooper for this film. We can see it being used in these behind the scenes clips. Fincher has been shooting on RED for a long time for many reasons, and one being resolution, that I'll touch on in a bit. So it's no surprise when the V-Raptor was announced, it was going to be the camera of choice. We shot The Killer on brand new RED Raptor cameras. I think the housing was still cooling when they arrived for prep. The other camera they used was the RED Komodo. I always love when that camera pops up. I have covered that camera before in the Cinematography of DEVOTION, which Messerschmidt was also the cinematographer. I'm not sure which shots they used the Komodo on. I could probably guess, but if we're guessing, then I think these two cameras matched well. I find nowadays all these cameras are so good in terms of the ways we qualify camera equipment. Resolution, light sensitivity, dynamic range, all that stuff. It really just comes down to what are the demands of the project, director, etc. They did shoot in the 2.39:1 aspect ratio compared to previous films. I felt strongly we should change it up, especially as we're going to all these different locations. That is always a big decision, but keep that in mind when watching the film. How much width they needed compared to height in order to tell their story. It looks like The Killer was shot in 6K with a 17% extraction as well. I did shoot some stuff in 8K and 7K with 25% extraction when we wanted more of a look around the room or when shooting plates. For this project, the lenses they chose were the light Summilux Cs. I've talked about lenses many times, and it's usually because they give a certain character or a look. They chose these lenses for a particular reason. The Summiluxes are spectacular and remarkably consistent, particularly where I like to work with the aperture around a T2 or T2.5. In my work with David, we're not looking for a lot of character in the lens. He does go on to say if they want character, they can shoot wide open, but it's about control, which seemed to be a running theme in their interviews. I've also talked extensively about filters on this channel. I love using them. You may think after watching the film, they must have used some kind of filtration. Well, Messerschmidt tries to avoid using them. I'm a bit paranoid about double reflections. However, I discovered a plugin for Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve called Scatter. That is a digital filter emulator. We tested it before shooting, so we knew how far we could push it and use it in some scenes with enormous success. I just want to point out they said we tested multiple times during interviews. It's not about just use this or that. Even at their level, they are still testing. There is a difference between fixing it in post and planning the look you want and figuring out how you can achieve it, either by doing it in camera or doing it in post. They used these techniques during the Dominican Republic scene as they wanted it to feel hot and sweaty. So go watch or rewatch that scene, and here's a look at Scatter he was talking about. Go check it out if you're interested, and like always, the best way to find out what it does, do some testing. When it comes to the look of the film, there's a couple things that stand out, and I was surprised how they approached it. It wasn't something they pre-visualized, they let it come out naturally. That had a lot to do with the locations. There were a lot, and letting that be their inspiration. We just got to the Dominican Republic and realized the cab companies all have different colors. So we went, okay, that's interesting. We can use that to the benefit of the film. That became kind of the way that location looked. It wasn't like we wanted the film to have 6 looks. It was more about what the locations look like. Ask yourself, what does each location look like? How does it feel? This was done very well, and it's interesting how it wasn't exactly planned out. Fincher does use a lot of green screens as well. He also utilized LED walls. The Paris interiors were shot on a stage. The one thing I've noticed over the years with Fincher is the driving scenes feel real. I usually hate interior car scenes on a stage, but Fincher's use of green screens and LED walls looks good. Another example of control. Speaking of the look, here's something I'm sure we've all heard before. I shoot commercials sometimes and people come to me and say, I want the David Fincher look. I say, you have to do it till it's perfect. You have to do the hard work. And David does it, and he's incredibly tenacious with it. That is, I think, a very difficult thing to maintain as a director. This is some good stuff. If you're into filmmaking, watch interviews, read articles, find behind the scenes footage, you'll learn something. Okay, I really want to talk about the fight scene. In order to do that, I have to talk about the camera work. Fincher doesn't use a lot of handheld shots in his films, so I was surprised seeing it in The Killer, or so I thought. They actually did consider it and stabilizing the shots after in post, but opted against it. We had lots of discussions about that at the beginning. Then David came back and said, maybe I'm thinking about this the wrong way. What if we do it stable? So instead we reverse the process, shooting everything stable and then adding movement in post-production. So based on what the killer was doing, the camera would follow. Confident would equal fluid, and when frazzled, the camera breaks away. That is something I felt right away. Okay, on to the fight. My first impressions were, yeah, I like this. We have seen how many fight scenes? At this point, it's like, how many ways can we show it? Some fight scenes Fincher did in Fight Club were referred to as abstract texture, and for The Killer, he wanted more intimacy. We wanted something that was absolutely exhausting for the audience, that we would look at it and go, oh my god, they're going to die, both of them are going to die. There's this movement to the camera. That's why I wanted to talk about the handheld work, or lack of it. From the trailer, I've pieced together random clips from the fight scene. It's all I got, so have a look, and you can just feel the impacts. There's this shake that happens ever so slightly, and it's just enough punch to give this scene some weight. The pacing, sound design, the fight itself, how it was choreographed, top-notch stuff. There was also something different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I liked it, but didn't know what it was until I was doing some research. When it came to the fight, he didn't even want to hear them making vocalizations. That was it. When I rewatched the scene, maybe you have a grunt or two, but that's it. Fincher laughed when he said, the world's most deadly, quietest fight. They went on to talk about how some fights are very fast-paced or confusing. That was a trend for a while, but they wanted something different for The Killer. We want to make sure the audience starts to map out the geography of the house while this is happening, so they almost have the same realization at the time of The Killer that the gun is where it is. They mentioned a tremendous amount of energy went into the fight scene, and I think it paid off. I mentioned the movie Devotion earlier, and it has amazing aerial photography, but there's a ground battle that was intense. I know it's a team effort, but I'd definitely like to see Messerschmidt elaborate on either of these scenes. There's something there worth exploring. I do want to finish with some quotes he had to say about the work he does. I love hearing about what other filmmakers say about the process. I mean, for me, the script is a recipe. It's a serving, a suggestion, and the film comes from the performances and the director and the vision the director has for the film. Even with his resume, he has something you might want to hear. I think in every creative endeavor, satisfaction is the enemy. It's the fear. I think when you walk away and feel really good about something, that's when you've done the worst work. That's kind of a painful reality of the job, but I look at different stuff all the time and wish I had made different choices. That's how you learn, I guess. I really wish I had more for you. Some of the BTS looked interesting, and it would be nice to take a closer look. Hopefully some more information does come out. The Killer is worth a watch. I know I don't really get into reviewing the film, plenty of reviews online. I just want to cover the technical specs because I always find the process of filmmaking interesting, and maybe you do too. Well, there you have it, the cinematography of The Killer. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button because there's definitely more on the way. Subscribe so you don't miss out. Leave a comment if you have questions. Until next time, it's a wrap.